Right guys, we've cleaned this casting out in here, and it was full of this like hardened grease that's obviously been in there for a long time. So we scraped all of that out. It's horrible stuff, but we've got all of that out, so we've got that clean in there. And I've just been basically just using Scotch-Brite with a bit of oil on, green Scotch-Brite with a bit of oil, and we've cleaned up that bearing face with that, and that's come up really nicely. I've also cleaned up this bottom surface with the same. I'd already done that to an extent before I used it on the mill, but I've just given that a really good going over. It doesn't look shiny because it's got a coat of oil just from using the Scotch-Brite really, so it's quite dark and dull looking on there, but I'm leaving the oil on it just to hopefully prevent any rust while I'm doing the rebuild. I've also used, and this is again, and I've mentioned it several times, these stainless steel dental picks, incredibly useful, and I've been using those to get in, right into this corner here, and I've been scraping all of the sort of solidified grease out of this corner and into the sort of areas in here. It's really useful for scratching and scraping away bits of stuff like that. So all I'm doing now, so we've done the sort of insides and this bottom face. So what I'm doing now really is I'm going to start on this front side, and you can see, it's in a pretty mucky old state. So basically I'm just using the methylated spirits on a rag, and I'm just going around and getting rid of all the muck that's on the paintwork, and you can see straight away, quick rub, and that's bringing that paintwork back to a good standard. So I'll work my way around, I'll bring you back once I've done that. I'll set to and clean the rest of the sort of painted part of the casting up now, and I'll bring you back once we've done that, show you what that looks like, and then we'll move on to the bearing surface. Right, so there we go guys, that's got all of the casting paintwork cleaned up, and you can see there, Apex or Apex, however it's pronounced, fully badged up. It's a shame they didn't show that on it wouldn't have mattered, I'd have probably still put a bid on it, to be fair. But yeah, it's cleaned up not too bad. There's a couple of bits where the original filler and paint's missing, where it's been clamped around here, and there's a blister around this other side where it's come away, but it is what it is. It's an old rotary table, and it's going to get used as a rotary table, not as something to put on the mantelpiece, so I've got no intentions of doing anything with that. It's cleaned up, we've got all the muck and nasties off it, and that's perfectly good enough. That's got all of that clean, so next job I'm just going to have a go at wiping this down now and see what's on this bearing surface, what it looks like. So the bearing surface itself, which is here, this is the outer, so the outer portion of this is what is the bearing surface for the underside of the table. This centre section is relieved, and I'm presuming that that's for grease. I'm guessing, I really don't know, but it looks like it could be a grease trap, if you like, and that would probably stop any, if you were using coolant and any coolant got between the bearing surface, it would probably, if you pack that centre section full of grease, it would stop any coolant getting down inside into the rotary table. I use a bit of coolant, but I don't use enough for that to be a concern. So interestingly, and I've seen this in a few places on this rotary table, actually on the table itself, which we'll come to, and on here, I don't know whether it is, but yeah, there's a couple of areas, looks like there's been 2 holes drilled in here at some point that have been filled with, I think it's like JB weld or plastic metal or whatever you want to call it, and there looks to be quite a bigger area there that looks to have been filled again, which is a bit odd. I really don't know how you would need to fill an area that size. It's pretty flush, but yeah, it definitely looks like that's been filled with sort of JB weld or plastic metal or something along those lines. I can't really feel it. You can feel a difference in texture, but there's no steps as such to feel. And you know, it's a second-hand rotary table at the end of the day. It'll be fine. Oh, meant to say, I switched out from using the methylated spirits for cleaning the paintwork, and been using the good old WD-40. This is a fantastic. It's so many uses, but as a cleaner, especially when you've got oily, greasy, old oil, old grease that's hard, baked on, this just dissolves it. It makes cleaning so easy, far easier than degreaser, and obviously it leaves a light film of oil, very thin oil, admittedly, but over everything, which for me helps from a corrosion perspective while I'm doing this stuff. Whereas if I left this overnight, especially like on this bearing surface, if I'd used the degreaser, the meths, and left that overnight, that would rust up overnight in here at the moment. So yeah, WD's a much better option. So bearing surface looks pretty good. We're just going to clean this this centre section, so I'm just going to leave that with the WD on it for a few minutes. You can already see it's starting to melt. This looks like grease. I just wondered if they were holes. I don't know, we'll poke those out potentially and see what that is, but we'll leave that a while with the WD on it, and then I'll bring you back once we've cleaned that up. So we've cleaned the majority of that off. That was just grease, old solid packed grease. It's needed 3 or 4 goes with the WD to get it dissolved. And again, I'm just using the old dental pick, and I'm just going around now, and you can see like bits like this. These do look like holes for holding grease of some sort that have been drilled or recessed into the casting, or they may just be from the casting itself, from the casting process, not really sure. But yeah, just going around and just using the dental pick to the real stubborn stuff to get that off. And again, into this radius here, look, just a quick scrape round, and it's just really useful for getting out this kind of stuff without really damaging the component in any way. Yeah, maybe that grease has been in there since factory. I really don't know. I've got no idea how old this thing is. It's obviously fairly old, just judging by the state of it. So we'll give that another spray WD, clean bit of rag. Very bizarre, these things full of holes that have been filled with, it's like white metal or something like that, it looks like, actually, as opposed to anything else. When I scratch that, yeah, it's really quite soft and sticky. It could be lead, something similar to that. So these holes might have been from the casting process, and they've been filled with lead or something. Really don't know. Interesting to note. Centre pop hole, another one there, another one there, another one there, one there, and in a straight line straight across here, centre pop holes right the way across there that seem to be in line with the the axis, if you want to call it that, where the bolt holes are. It's quite interesting. No idea why they would do that, especially on a bearing surface. But anyway, So yeah, that's pretty much it for this piece really. I'm just going to do a final bit of Scotch-Brite work in this bearing bore. We'll clean the bearing bore up, and then we'll do something with this face here. We'll give that a clean up with the Scotch-Brite. That's got quite a bit of rust and oxidation on it, so we'll just give that a really good rub over. You can see there just straight away that that's bringing that up. It's bringing that up nicely. It's getting rid of that. So I'm just going to go around just the last few bits of bare metal work that need it, and we'll give those a clean up, and then this underface I need to do as well. So I'll do this final bit of clean up and I'll bring you back, and then we're probably going to move on. We'll oil this up and make sure it's nicely oiled up so it can't rust, and then we'll probably move on to the actual rotary table piece itself. Okay guys, this is the actual rotating piece. So you'll see there's a bearing surface here, which is pretty good. That's the actual bearing surface that mates with the bearing surface on the casting. That's obviously fairly clean. This inner surface here is where the grease gets packed, and that's largely going to be grease in there that's gone hard in that sort of centre section. And this outer section's kind of in fresh air, not really doing anything. It sort of sits over the outside of the casting, and you can see that this is really just clogged up with loads of dry grease. And what I'm doing to start with is I've just given this a spray of the old WD, and it works. And I'm just drowning this in WD-40 for now, just to try and lubricate, to loosen the grease up. And WD is really good at that. So basically going to leave that for a few minutes now for that to work, and then I'm going to come back, wipe off the worst of the grease and oil deposits off the thing, and then we're going to set about it with good old Scotch-Brite. So I'll bring you back in a bit when we've got the worst of the dross off and we've started doing a bit of the clean up, and give you kind of a progress update, and then I'll give you another update when we get to the end of this piece. Well, there we go guys, 10-15 minutes later, that's got that all cleaned up, and I've inspected the surface, and there's one sort of ding in the surface that's actually on the bearing surface, which is just here, but it's very minor, and there's no raised edges around that, so I'm not even going to go near that with a stone. I'm just going to leave that. It's not doing any harm. So that's got that bit, that's sort of got that half of it done, all cleaned up, all the bearing diameters cleaned and bearing faces cleaned. So I'm just going to give that an oil up, and then we'll flip it over and we'll start on the OD and on the top surface, and we'll give that a similar sort of treatment, just basically WD-40, Scotch-Brite and oil and a paper rag, and using the old dental picks to get into this. These are so handy. I'm really pleased I've got these. Getting into these corners here to scrape out grease and muck and whatnot are really, really useful. So yeah, we'll flip it over, we'll set about the other side, and I'll bring you back when we've done some clean up on the rest of it. Alright guys, that's got the rotary table section complete now, so that's been fully sort of cleaned up. It's gone pretty well. There's a couple of bits on it where they've done the same thing again. They've used some, I don't know, plastic metal, white metal, JB Weld, whatever, obviously to fill some imperfections in the casting, but largely in areas that don't matter, so around the OD. But yeah, that's all cleaned up. I'm not doing anything with the slots other than just cleaning them out. They're perfectly good enough, and to be honest, most of the time I'm probably going to use the centre bung for clamping anyway. And I still, I've no T-nuts for this yet, so that's another job that I need to do, is make some T-nuts up to fit this. But so yeah, that's done now. Happy with that. So next job now is to move on to the small items, and gradually work my way through one at a time, just doing a bit of clean up. I'll not film that, it's the same stuff. It's oil, Scotch-Brite, WD-40, just basically cleaning them up, getting the rust off. And if there's any bits that I need to fix along the way, I'll bring you back, show you what that is and what I'm doing to fix it. But other than that, bit of clean up, and I'll bring you back once I've cleaned a few more bits and pieces up. And then the one that I'm going to need to do something special with is the actual worm itself, the worm shaft. This is bent. Now, I think it's hopefully it's only bent from this portion here that the handle sits on. It didn't feel like it was bent on the, between the two bearings and the worm, because that all felt quite good. But you can see as you rotate it, it's bent. I can see just looking down the line of the shaft there that it's cocked off to an angle at the end, and I would imagine what's happened there, it's been dropped at some point, and that's bent that end piece over. So yeah, we're going to have to see if we can straighten that out a bit when we get onto that bit. So yeah, I'll bring you back once I've done a bit more clean up of some of the smaller items. Right guys, we've cleaned the worm shaft up, and what I'm doing is I've just got it sat, and it just about sits in the width of this V-block, just on the very end of the two bearing diameters here. And I've just been checking this out to see, because I'm sure this shaft's bent. So basically what we're doing is just checking out where the bend might be. So we're on centre there, and I've just been basically turning this on the end of the worm here, just gently. It's quite hard to do, a bit fiddly, and this end diameter is a bit beaten up, but largely there's probably about 1/10 of movement or something. That's me gone off the diameter. So there's about 1/10 of movement there. So I'm happy that that end is okay. I've done the same thing on this diameter here, and I've got the same reading. I've also sat on top of the sort of bearing diameters themselves and just made sure that they're running true, and you can see, they're running good. So I'm just on this end diameter, so I know the bearing diameters are good and the worm's good, so everything this from here outwards is good. So I'm just going to check this end piece now, and I've already marked it with a marker pen, but you can see we've got about 40 thou movement on that end diameter there, and that's the high point. So I've just put a mark on with a marker pen where the high point is, and so what's happened there, that it's had the handle on it, obviously in transport or whatever, and somebody's dropped it or banged it and it's bent it. Obviously this is supported inside the casting, so it's bent it from probably somewhere in this threaded section, or just this end piece it might have bent from this transition. So it's not affecting the accuracy of the thing in any way. It's just that the handle, when you're winding it, is wobbling because it's sat on this shaft that's bent. So somehow I need to see if I can try and influence that back, and I'm not really sure how I'm going to do that yet. But we'll set it up somehow in the vise. May need to put some heat on and use some kind of persuasion to try and bring that back a little bit. I'm probably not going to get it spot on, but I'll see if I can certainly improve it a little bit from the 40 thou movement there is on there at the minute. Right guys, we've had some heat on there in the vise and given it a bit of a massaging. So if I put that back now, you just roll that round. Oops, I'm dropping off the end of the V blocks again. That's within about 3/10 of a thou at that end, so I'm happy with that. What I have done, unfortunately, is I've just marked up this part of the shaft a little bit, which I kind of knew I was going to do. It wasn't a soft jaws job this, I had to just get hold of it in the vise, and rather than try and hold this bit, which is the important bit, I've gripped on this bit. All that sits on here is the handle at the end and the ring that's got the subdivisions on. So what I'm going to do is, once this is, it's still a bit warm, once this is cooled down, I'm going to pop it in the lathe. I'm just going to tidy that diameter up, just to get rid of those any raised areas of that marking that I've put on there, that's all. But that should now be a lot better than it was, certainly in terms of the handle movement. So I'll do that, and then I'll carry on with the cleanup. I've got the worm wheel to clean up now as probably the last piece, and then I'll bring you back when we're starting the rebuild. Alright then guys, it's rebuild time. So that's all of the parts now cleaned up, oiled up, ready for rebuild, and I'm just trying to work out which order that I need to do that in. And I think the first thing I need to do is assemble the worm and the associated pieces that go into that first, because obviously I won't be able to put that in once the worm gear's in and the table's in. So we'll start with the worm part first. So I'll bring the housing over to the clean sheet of paper. I've got some grease ready to go, and we'll start building that up. So I'll bring you back in a moment when we're in the middle of doing some of that. Okay, so we've got this now. When I took this out, this groove here with these 4 holes going through it was full of grease that had hardened solid, and I've just looked at the makeup now, and where this actually sits in the housing, there's actually an oil point there. So these 4 holes are actually for oil to flow through into where the central shaft goes through in the middle. So we're not going to put any grease in there. We're going to pack some grease into this back slot, which is where this retainer goes to hold it, and we're just going to put a bit of grease in there, just really to hold that retainer in place while I put it together. So we'll just give this a bit of a grease just in that area. And I'm not going to go mad with this. It doesn't need masses and masses like it had in it when I took it apart. I think I'll just put a general wipe on these other areas, on the bearing surfaces. There's some oil still left in it, so it'll be a mixture of oil and grease, which I'm sure will be good enough for what it needs to do. So we'll just pop that in there, and that grease just holds that in place nicely, stops it dropping out. So hopefully we can line that hole up. So a bit of grease on the screw while we're at it. There we go. That's that piece in. And that needs to come back out again. Clown. At least I know it fits. So what we're going to do now is put the central piece in, the actual worm shaft itself. Again, this was all packed with grease. Totally unnecessary. This obviously runs with oil rather than grease. There's oil grooves. You can see there's oil grooves into the 2 bearing surfaces there. The only bit that really should be greased is the worm itself. So we'll have another go. So we'll pop that into here. Nice. And then assemble the whole thing. it still fits, which is good. Okay, next is this ring, threaded ring that sits on here. That's more like it. There was hardly anything came out of those threads. I thought I cleaned them. It must just have been a tiny bit of swarf or something still stuck in there. Well, there's no end float in there, and that's rotating okay. So we'll call that good. Okay, next. I'm going to guess that that's the right position for now. Well, I'm pleased with that. That's running a lot better, because that was obviously with that shaft being bent before was running up and down a bit, but that looks nice. Feels reasonably free. I think that'll obviously bed in a bit over time. So next, I believe, is the handle. Or the hand wheel, sorry. We'll just take this screw out. I'll give this a good wipe over in a bit. Everything's absolutely smeared in oil at the moment, so everything's really slippy. Oh, that's much better. So that was quite wonky before. Obviously with that shaft being bent, that looks a lot better now. Good, right, we'll leave all that as it is. That's that part of it done. And I think the next piece now is the table. So we'll move that out of the way for a minute. Right, now again, when this came, this recess here was packed full of grease, and I'm really not sure whether I should redo that or whether I should just leave that without any. I think I am going to put a bit of grease in there, so we'll just give that a wipe. So what we'll do now is a bit of oil on there, plenty of oil into this ball, and then hopefully drop that onto there. Feels nice. So the next job then is the worm wheel itself. I only cleaned this up last night, so it's got a fresh coat of oil in there. Nice. Then there's the positioning dowel. Or locking dowel, locking pin, whatever we want to call it. And we've got 3 screws that hold this in place. I'm just going to take those up to a nip and then back them off. Because obviously I would imagine that these would have had a torque setting originally associated with them, because the tighter these go, you're obviously drawing the whole thing together at that point. So what we're going to do is just gradually increase the torque on these until I can feel that it's changing the it may not do anything at all. No, it doesn't. I don't think it's going to make any difference. No. That's it, they're good and tight. So It's starting to get heavy now. Right, so we're back, guys. I've got that set up now. So we've put some grease on, and you can see there that's running lovely and free and quiet both directions. I've got probably 8 minutes. Yeah, there's probably about 8 minutes there of sorry, no, these are in 2-minute steps, so that'll be 16 minutes worth of backlash in there, and that feels nice. I've tried going a bit tighter than that and it just feels too tight, but that feels nice. There was about 20 minutes previously, so I've taken 4 minutes worth of based on this scale, 4 minutes worth of backlash out of there, but that feels very nice. So that's it, all greased up, and then I've now got it set properly. So if you watch the worm, if I take that out and move it round to the second position there, the table's now free to rotate with the worm fully disengaged, and then drop that back in, and that's it, back in mesh again. Right, guys, final piece to this, the 2mm plate that John Mills kindly burnt out for me on his plasma cutter arrived. So it was a tiny bit oversized, so did some fettling just on the grinder, just taking really the scale off the outside really more than anything. Got that to be a nice fit in that recess, and then just marked out the 3 holes, and I just transferred the marks using a marker pen just by eyesight where they're lined up onto the plate, and I used a set of dividers again by eyesight to mark the distance into the centre of the hole, and just scribed a line through my marker pen, centre punched all 3 holes, drilled them, countersinked them, and then fitted them to the bottom of the rotary table using the 3 screws that were already in it. So that's got that nicely sealed up now. So John kindly sent me a sticker or 2 as well, so that'll be going up on the board at some point. So and I'm sure there's nobody that watches my channel that doesn't already subscribe and watch John Mills, but if there is somebody that's never come across him, then go and check him out. Very similar sort of work to what I do, except he's been doing it a lot longer, similar size machines, similar sorts of jobs, that kind of thing. So yeah, go and check John out, and personally from me, thank you very much, John, very much appreciated, and that's helped me really complete this project and make it ready for use. So yeah, thank you very much, John, really appreciate that. So with that, we'll wrap this episode up. We'll get that wrapped up and stored neatly away somewhere, and it's ready for use when I want to use it. So I'd like to thank you all for watching as usual, and for subscribing. I hope that's been interesting, a little bit different, you know, no machining as such, but just something a bit different, lots of sort of handwork and clean up, but yeah, something a bit different. And I've also got this now in my armoury ready for use on the milling machine. So we'll catch you all very shortly on another episode, which will probably be the fitting of the DRO to the milling machine.